Is atheism truly a mere rejection of the idea of God? Is it simply disbelief in God?
Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Plink. I respond to various theological and ideological questions and claims from a rationalistic and naturalistic approach in an effort to give and explain the opposite viewpoint and help to balance the conversation. Today's video comes to us from a channel and creator called Ash Mays, who seems to think that everyone is, in some way or other, religious. And atheists are no exception. Atheists are just substituting other religion-like things in place of any theistic religion. Now, my initial reaction to such an idea, while not acquiescing to it, would be, so what? I mean, atheism is not the same as irreligious, and it never has been. Lest you would be leaving out many a non-theistic religion out of the conversation, like Buddhism or Jainism. But even if you wanted to make the argument that any branch of atheism just supplants one type of faith for another, none of that even gets to the heart of the matter, which would be, does any God actually exist? And trying to muddy the waters with talk about atheists just being as religious as any people who believe in God, that not only ignores the core issue, but seems to do your own position a world of disservice. Because whenever a theist claims atheists are just as religious as they are, they tend to do so in an accusatory manner, as if being religious were a bad thing, and the atheists are just as guilty of it as the theists are. It's a bit like saying, yeah, I robbed that bank, but you held up a liquor store or two in your time, so there, haha. Well, that's not an argument. It's not even pointing out hypocrisy, unless you're claiming that practitioners of one faith are somehow not allowed to claim that a different faith is incorrect in their beliefs or practices, which is a large part of what every religious apologist spends a good portion of their time doing. But I don't even agree with the starting premise that atheism is just another religion to begin with. But hey, who knows? Maybe Ash will actually have an argument that holds water in claiming that atheism actually is a religion. So let's give him the floor and hear him out on why the non-faithful are, in actuality, super full of faith. But before we get to that, if you end up liking what you see in this video and would like to help out the channel, make sure to subscribe and click the bell so you'll always be notified when new content comes out. Check out my social media, including my Patreon, Twitter, and Blue Sky, all linked in the description. And of course, like this video, pop in a comment. All that goes a long way towards pleasing the YouTube algorithm, who perceives possibilities past pious pronouncements and prioritizes principled paths promoting peace and personal power. Purely pragmatic perspectives permit palpable improvements propelled by proof, not prayer, parting with preternatural prescriptions of pietistic pinheads. May keep my channel motoring along. Now on to today's video.
Now, today I want to challenge the notion that atheism is in fact as free-thinking as atheists would like you to believe that they are, and prove that in fact atheism never removes religion. It simply replaces it.
So to start off, as previously mentioned, atheism is not the opposite of religion. Atheism is the opposite of theism. The opposite of religious would be irreligious. There are many irreligious people who also believe in some kind of God or higher power, and there are plenty of religious practitioners who do not believe in any kind of a deity. There are entire religions that do not posit or even much concern themselves with the existence of a god. The previously mentioned Buddhism and Jainism are two of the big ones. Taoism does not typically posit any deities. Confucianism also doesn't. Some indigenous people's spiritual traditions didn't focus on any deities per se, but instead spirits, ancestors, and harmony with nature. So, to be religious is not the same as to be a theist. Hell, you can even be spiritual and believe in magic and souls and an afterlife and still be an atheist, so long as you don't believe any particular deity or creator god concept was behind it all. Ash seems to be focusing on one particular type of atheist, the anti-theist, anti-religious, hard atheist contingent of the atheist community, and insisting that they are the entirety of what modern atheism is. And while he couldn't be more wrong about that, Okay, whatever. I'll play along for the sake of the argument. All atheists hate religion and all its practitioners and absolutely eschew any hint of organized systems of worship or spiritual faith. So, what now?
Now, let's start with something really fundamental. It seems to be that human beings are hardwired to be religious creatures. Okay? Through thousands of years of human history, we can see that atheism, or not believing in God, is a fairly new idea, relatively.
Even when I try to help you, man, you go and mess it up. If we're gonna focus on religion and faith, then keep it to religion and faith. But then you go and say something as stupid as not believing in God is a relatively new thing. Well, no, it's not, Ash. I mean, the non-theistic religions I've already mentioned date back thousands of years, but in addition to that, there's also been organized systems of thought that have rejected belief in God going all the way back to ancient times. In ancient India, as early as the 6th century BCE, the Charvaka school of philosophy explicitly rejected the existence of gods, the afterlife, and supernatural phenomena, instead advocating for a materialistic view. Other Indian philosophical schools like Sankhya and early Mimamsa were also atheistic in that they did not accept a creator deity within their systems. In ancient Greece, by the 5th century BCE, there were thinkers like Diagoras of Melos who were openly described as atheists for denying the existence of gods. Basically, as long as there's been organized belief in deities, there have been those within the societies in which those beliefs arose who rejected them. Atheism is literally older than theism, because before the first God concept was ever conceived of, that person who conceived of it was an atheist prior to believing in that God.
Okay, so it seems that human beings are hardwired to believe in God. Now, you might say just because that's the way that it's been done, or that's the way that it's been thought of till now, doesn't mean that it's the right way for things to be or the right way for you to think about it. However, it does seem, and I'm going to get into this, that it is hardwired and that you cannot be truly irreligious, that you cannot be truly an atheist.
Bullshit. I'm calling blazing bullshit.
Humans are neither hardwired for belief in God nor for practicing religion, which again are two separate things. If it were the case that humans were hardwired for belief in God, then belief in God would be automatic rather than a learned behavior. But all religion is learned, as are all God concepts. But when you're talking about some belief or behavior being hardwired into humans, you're talking about the realm of cognitive biology and how the brain works. While the idea of a God gene has been explored and debated, the current scientific consensus within fields like cognitive science, of religion, and evolutionary psychology suggests that belief in God is not likely to be a single hardwired trait. Instead, it's more likely that several aspects of human cognition, which evolved for other reasons, make us predisposed to religious belief as a side effect, such as the Hypersensitive Agency Detection Device, or HADD. This is a cognitive mechanism that biases humans to readily attribute intentionality and agency to events and objects in their environment. This tendency is thought to be an evolutionary adaptation, potentially leading to survival advantages in a world where detecting hidden threats is crucial. You may have heard about this evolutionary advantage in early humans before. If you see the bushes nearby rustling, the person who attributed it to a large predator hiding in those bushes and then ran away afraid had a better chance of survival than the person who just thought it was a random occurrence and stuck around, possibly getting eaten. The fact that we assign agency and intentionality to natural occurrences is a byproduct of a cognitive tendency that kept us one step ahead of the things that wanted to make a meal out of us. And the consequence today is that people see God in rainbows and babies giggling. Other evolutionary adaptations that make belief in the supernatural, and particularly a God being, more common include things like pattern recognition. Humans are adept at finding patterns, sometimes even where they don't exist, which could contribute to seeing purpose or design in the universe. Also, there's the psychological need for explanation and comfort. Religion often provides explanations for the unknown and offers comfort in times of distress. These psychological needs might make religious ideas more appealing. And then, as far as developing organized religion goes, a big evolutionary reason for that is social cohesion. Shared religious beliefs and practices can promote group cooperation and social bonding, which could have had evolutionary advantages. So, none of these aspects of human cognition develop directly in order to foster God belief, and God belief itself is not hardwired into humanity. It's just an unfortunate side effect of the various things that are hardwired into us that often lend towards theistic belief.
So, when an atheist rejects the idea of a God, whether that is a biblical style Abrahamic God or a more abstract Eastern idea of God, the rejection of God does not simply end there. I don't believe in God. That doesn't end there.
Yes, it does. And anything else that you're about to posit is totally separate and divorced from that person's atheism.
It is almost always replaced by some kind of other ideology. And you see this with religion being replaced with Marxism or communism. These are state worship religions. They have, structures like a religious structure, and they do believe in an objective truth, depending on which ideology it is, that would take the place of God.
Yeah, that's actually not how it worked.
So this is Ash's personal bias shining through. A cursory glance at his video list shows that Ash has a real bug up his ass about communism. Now, obviously, leaving religion does not automatically turn one into a communist. I think I would know. I left religion and I'm not a communist. And frankly, in terms of communism, as Ash is attempting to position it, as state or government worship, I don't see hardly any of that in the US atheist community. While I will admit to a certain leftist or liberal tendency, that certainly doesn't translate to state worship, especially given the current administration and the common liberal disdain for it. But even under Biden in the previous administration, or even the more well-loved Obama administration, you'd be hard-pressed to find any of the prominent atheists in America advocating total supplication to or reverence for the government or any representatives of the state. Furthermore, the idea that communism, or any economic or political philosophy for that matter, replaces religious belief or theism is utterly idiotic in light of the fact that nearly every theist also has economic and political philosophies, in addition to their belief in God. And given the ravenousness of both theistic belief as well as political engagement of many people who would be categorized as the evangelical right,
if you are anointed by Yahweh for a specific plan and purpose, you are a Messiah. Yeshua was the Messiah of mankind, but Donald Trump is the Messiah of America.
I think it's pretty clear that while politics can merge in many ways with theistic faith, they are very clearly separate things, and one can have both, one or the other, or neither. So the idea that some people leave religion and become politically active, and that this indicates that they've just replaced religion with a political philosophy, well, it's seriously lacking some evidence to back it up. Most people have political philosophies to some degree. Also, this notion of replacing religion with politics ignores those atheists who never had a religion to replace. What about those who were just raised irreligious? Or would you claim that they are all rabid political activists who jumped on the communist bandwagon as soon as they could walk? Also, even if it were the case that someone raised religious, became an atheist later on, then at some point also became highly politically motivated and engaged, that doesn't mean that such engagement had anything to do with the rejection of religion. See, that would be what's called a post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy, claiming that because event Y followed event X, event Y must have been caused by event X without properly establishing causality.
No, Mother, I could not feel your church group praying for my safety. The fact that I'm home safe does not prove that it worked. That logic is post hoc ergo propter hoc. No, I'm not sassing you in Eskimo talk.
Just because someone leaves religion and then becomes, in your example, a communist, does not mean that leaving religion caused them to become a communist. You have to offer some kind of evidence that links the two and shows causality. And maybe if you even had any kind of statistic showing an increase in any kind of political engagement when leaving religion, you might have the beginning inklings of a point. But you don't even have that. Just the self-assured insistence that leaving religion makes you a commie.
So being an atheist in those senses does not seem to does not seem to reject God. It seems to replace God. So those people are religious. And you can see this with things like climate activism. They have dogma, doctrine. There are heresies. There are sins. You can be excommunicated. It functions like a religious system in every single way.
What are you babbling about?
You are playing majorly fast and loose with what can be considered doctrine, sins, or heresy. All of those things have, as a crucial part of their definitions, the existence of God. Doctrine is the expressed word or command of God. Sin is something that is bad purely and for no other reason than because it goes against the will or command of God. And heresy is speaking against the will or command of God, and it's bad for no other reason than because it goes against God. On the other hand, climate activism has nothing so frivolous as commands that must be followed just because we say so. There are instead best practices for environmental protection that's borne out by the studies and work of climate scientists, whose work and findings is publicly available for anyone and everyone to examine to see if there are flaws. For instance, PFAs, or per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or more commonly known as forever chemicals. They're a large group of human-made chemicals that don't break down easily in the environment and can accumulate in the environment, in animals, and in the human body over time, and have been shown to have numerous harmful effects on the environment and on living organisms. Exposures to such PFAs has been linked to various health problems, including increased cholesterol levels, decreased vaccine response in children, increased risk of thyroid disease, increased risk of some cancers like kidney or testicular, increased risk of high blood pressure or preeclampsia during pregnancy, lower infant birth weight, immune system effects, liver damage, fertility issues. And due to their persistence and potential health impacts, PFA contamination is a significant environmental and public health concern. Many efforts are underway to monitor and mitigate PFA's contamination. Now, this isn't doctrine, because none of it was based on nothing more than authoritative commands. It's based on proven science and a wealth of corroborating evidence. Speaking out against any effort to curb the use of PFAs isn't heresy because, for one, no one's trying to stop anyone from doing so. But instead, the effort is simply to show that PFAs are harmful, and thus any claim that they aren't is simply wrong. And continuing the use of forever chemicals isn't sin, it's just not good for the environment or people or animals in general. And since that's provable, you should stop using them. Basically, using valid reasoning to mitigate something perceived as negative is not at all what religion does. Religion says, don't cheat on your spouse because God doesn't want you to. That's doctrine. That's dogma. That's a sin. Valid reasoning, on the other hand, says don't cheat on your spouse because it will hurt them emotionally, ruin your relationship, potentially tear apart your family, and is a violation of a vow that you made to be faithful, thereby making you an untrustworthy person to your word, and thus more likely to be an untrustworthy member of society at large. That is clearly explained and provably sound reasoning. Climate activism is more like that. It's not saying, follow these environmental edicts for no other reason than because we say so. It's, here's a bunch of studies, evidence, explanations, and reasoning as to why these best environmental practices should be followed for the good of everyone. It's frankly distressing that you can't see the difference between the two, Ash.
Now, You might be thinking, well, I'm a rational atheist. I don't get into that kind of nonsense. I simply live in a rational way based in science. I only take what is rational. I don't get involved in silliness, and I don't believe in God, and I don't have some kind of religious system replacing it. Well, the problem with claiming that is that, well, when we're talking about Western atheists or people who are atheists who live in the Western world, what a lot of those people, and you might be one of them, and I want you to think about this for a moment, what a lot of those people do is that they either fail to recognize or refuse to admit that their rationality and liberalism exists within the frameworks created in Western society of a Judeo-Christian worldview.
Okay, that was a mouthful. But hey, who am I to criticize anyone for being long-winded? So, for starters, you had a moment in there where you accused all Western atheism of being liberal. And I have experienced that that is certainly not the case. As I can't even hint at disliking Donald Trump or MAGA in any of my videos without getting flamed from conservative atheists in the comments section who absolutely don't believe in God, but love them some Donald Trump. Not to mention, libertarianism, pretty much the polar opposite of communism, has an atheist streak a mile wide. I mean, Ayn Rand, pretty much the patron saint of libertarianism, was an atheist. But on to your larger point, and that is about the idea that Western society was built on Judeo-Christian values.
That the Western society that this rationalism exists in, those moral concepts being embedded in the society evolved through Judeo-Christian society in the West.
I would absolutely, wholeheartedly reject that idea. I would say that modern Western society exists as it does today in spite of Judeo-Christian values, not because of them. And that at one time, Western society did exist within a Christian framework, and that we have, over time, thankfully, excised many of those values. You know, values like slavery, as attested to time and again both in the Old Testament and New, and a practice that the Confederacy, a wholly Christian movement, sought to retain and often cited their Christian values as why they were so adamantly defending it. Or the genocide against the indigenous population of the burgeoning United States. The prevailing belief among many white Americans was that their culture and way of life, including Christianity, were superior. Removal was sometimes framed as a way of eventually Christianizing and civilizing Native Americans, albeit in a new territory away from white settlers. And westward expansion and the displacement of Native Americans was justified as part of God's plan or the natural course of progress where Christian civilization was destined to prevail. There's also the subjugation and chattel slavery of women, the classification of virtually anyone on the LGBTQ+ spectrum as living in abominable sin, which isn't to be tolerated in either law or culture. Or just the general idea that the church should not just be involved in matters of state, but should be the driving force in law and government. All of these things were aspects of Judeo-Christian ideology that were excised from Western society, much to the dismay of the Christians of the time, and in many cases, the Christians of today. Sociocultural progress has always come to the chagrin of the church, and Western culture has had to drag the church, kicking and screaming, into modern conceptions of things like I just listed. I mean, for fuck's sake, the Catholic Church didn't officially recognize the earth revolving around the sun and formally acknowledge their wrongness in condemning Galileo's work until 1992. As far as the notion that the laudable values of modern Western society, things like don't kill, don't steal or lie, caring for your fellow man as you do yourself, tending to the poor and downtrodden, being charitable and kind, etc., and the claim that all of these things came from Christian values, I would say that these kinds of values are fairly common in every successful society around the world throughout all of human history, including the non-Christian ones. I mean, all of those values are present in, for instance, Japan, which has one of the lowest crime rates in the world and a robust social safety net, with things like universal health care and a public pension system. And all this with having practically no cultural influence from any Christian tradition in its history, and a heavy leaning towards Buddhism. Remember that from earlier? It's one of those religions with no God in it. And the same can be found with many other countries and cultures throughout the world that have a good society that's based on values like don't kill, don't steal, be kind to others, and help those who need it, without being influenced by Christianity.
Now, the other thing is that when you reject any kind of spiritual ideas, God or spirituality, it can only go on for a certain while. You can only have that going on for a certain amount of time. And we do see that as well. For example, characters like C.S. Lewis, who was a devout atheist, a rabid atheist in his own kind of way of discussing it. He eventually found his way back to religion.
You serious?
Are you really trying to posit that one cannot remain an atheist for the rest of their life? What are you even talking about? The vast majority of prominent and famous atheists who have died have remained atheists till the end. Carl Sagan, Richard Feynman, Stephen Hawking, Marie Curie, Isaac Asimov, Bertrand Russell, Christopher Hitchens, the previously mentioned Ayn Rand, James Randi, Daniel Dennett, to name but a few of the most prominent ones. And of course, there are many prominent atheist speakers and activists today who have been openly atheists for years, decades even. But you, I guess, could make the claim that they'll eventually turn to religion in the remainder of their lives. But I mean, let's not just rely on anecdotal evidence here, Ash. If what you say were true, if people who leave religion can only do so for a period of time before eventually coming back to religion and belief in God, then if we saw a significant dip in religiosity in a population, it should eventually reverse and go back up, when all of those who left religion eventually return to it. Except that's not what we see. U.S. religiosity has been on the decline since the mid-1980s. That would be 40 years ago. So if all those people who left religion back then were in their 20s and 30s at the time, they'd be in their 60s and 70s now. Not much time left to switch back to religion before that cold hand of death grabs hold. And yet, we aren't seeing a reversal of the trend. Even the most recent and religiously optimistic data only shows that the decline of religious involvement is slowing. It hasn't reversed, and rate of religious nuns is still growing. More people are leaving religion than ever before, and very few are returning to it. And this, of course, is just in the US. The rest of Western society has even lower rates of religiosity and God belief than we do. Where are all these people who are supposedly returning to the religious fold, Ash? Because I sure as shit ain't seeing it.
And then you have recently characters like Richard Dawkins. I'm a cultural Christian. The society of the West is built on Christianity. I would hate to see that be destroyed.
Dawkins, still an atheist, Ash. Still doesn't believe in God. Still doesn't attend any church or part of any religion. You know, the things that this video is supposed to be about.
On the flip side, and again, this would be a topic of debate here, but I'm just going to give one example, the idea of somebody like Nietzsche, who said, God is dead, we have killed him, and was afraid of the nihilism that would come. He proposed ideas as to how to go about dealing with that, and yet his ideas couldn't save him from insanity.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
All right. Nietzsche's mental decline is a debated topic, as he died ultimately of pneumonia, and there was no post-mortem examination or autopsy performed on his brain to definitively determine the cause of his mental illness. But modern theories as to the cause of his psychological decline involve things like neurosyphilis, cerebral autosomal dominant arteriopathy with subcortical infarcts and leukoencephalopathy, which is a hereditary stroke disorder. Retroorbital meningioma, which is a slow-growing brain tumor. Or bipolar disorder followed by vascular dementia. You'll notice that all of these things are purely physiological issues and none involve just going insane because he didn't believe in God anymore. I mean, for fuck's sake, what an idiotic notion. I mean, how come Sagan didn't go crazy? Why didn't Asimov lose his mind? Pray tell, why did Hawkins remain in control of his faculties right up until the end? Put simply, there's absolutely no established link between atheism and mental disorder. The closest you can get to that is the statistics that show that people who are active members of a religious congregation tend to report greater levels of happiness than the religiously unaffiliated do. But this falls apart when you look into the findings a little deeper. That happiness comes from being part of a social in-group, and similar results can be found in secular organizations like organized sports or social clubs. So it has nothing to do with the faith or any belief in God, and everything to do with the fact that humans are social creatures that thrive in social environments. This take on the data is further proven when we look at global statistics, and you find out that the happiest countries, as per the World Health Organization's Happiness Index, tend to be the countries with the highest rates of atheism and the lowest rates of religiosity. Places like Finland, Denmark, Iceland, Sweden, Norway, Australia, New Zealand, and Switzerland. Clearly, the happiness in a place like that isn't tied to religion or theism. Furthermore, you insinuate that nihilism comes from atheism. And no, it doesn't. I know many atheists, and none are nihilists near as I'm aware. I'm certainly not one. Frankly, I found significantly more purpose and meaning in my life as an atheist than I ever did when I was a Christian. I'm also more fulfilled and less depressed than I was when I was under the yoke of a belief system that told me that the majority of the world's population, including many people I loved and cared about, were destined for the fires of hell for the horrid offense of not being Christians. So that was Ash and his attempt to malign atheism as being one big lie. And frankly, his points were a bit all over the place. Right from the start, he wasn't able to separate atheism, not believing in God, from religion, which is an organized system of belief that may or may not require the belief in a God. Then he tried to establish that atheism was just another religion, thereby implying religion itself as a bad thing, because if it isn't, then what are you complaining about atheists being religious for? He then insisted that atheism will make you a communist, which was just laughably stupid. Then he said that even though atheism itself isn't a religion, thus countering his earlier insistence that it is a religion, that it still grows out of Judeo-Christian values, even though modern Western society has stamped out so much of what, at one time, were the cornerstones of Judeo-Christian values. So much so that it cannot be rationally claimed that modern Western society actually reflects traditional Christianity in any way. Then Ash went completely off the rails into new levels of dipshittery in claiming that no one can stay an atheist for very long, and anyone who does is going to go insane from it.
I will go insane, and I will take you with me!
In the end, I detected a lot of ad hoc rescue taking place in Ash's video. That's when we very often desperately want to be right and hold onto certain beliefs despite any evidence presented to the contrary. As a result, we begin to make up excuses as to why our belief could still be true and is still true despite the fact that we have no real evidence for what we're making up. Because that's what's going on when you claim atheism will turn you into a communist. He's saying that because he dislikes atheists and he dislikes communists, that he's fabricating a link between the two. Or when you want to believe atheism will drive you insane and come up with a single anecdotal example of an atheist with a mental disease, most likely caused by a physiological issue. But hey, it must be the atheism that made him crazy. This whole video was grasping at the flimsiest of straws that not only had pretty much no evidence to back them up, but stand in utter opposition to all of the evidence that shows them to be wrong. So, when watching the entire video, start to finish, my assessment is as follows.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
And so that is where we'll end things for today. So thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like this video, comment, and subscribe so you'll always be notified when a new video comes out. Check me out on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Patreon if you'd like to support my work directly. My Teespring if you want some Plinky merchandise. All that linked below in the description. Special shout out to my most recent super thankers here on YouTube, Salvi Mike, Autumnal Fling, and Lord Ranulfer Ulfson. And with that said, until next time, I'm Professor Plink reminding you to keep striving for greater understanding. It's the best way to get wherever you want to go.